Okay, hello. I'm Ronen Stilman. I work in private practice in Edinburgh and in cyberspace. I'm a transactional analyst. I'm a psychotherapist, supervisor, and trainer. And in my previous professional life, I worked in companies developing and implementing solutions for telecommunications and financial services. So I think in systems. I think in human systems, societal systems, political systems, and I'd like to invite you to this sort of frame for this presentation. So to start, I would like a show of hands. Who here has a device that they interact with using touch, voice, or eye contact? Show your hands, show your hands.
Well, I don't know if we're not on the screen, but I'm sure everybody I'd have thought.
That's all of us. Okay, so quite a lot of people, yeah? Okay. But another question for you. Oh, sorry about this. Who in here remembers, okay, who here remembers what it was like when we had a dial-in phone?
No.
Yeah?
Yep.
Does anybody know here what a dial-in tone is?
Yes.
Yeah. So you, my esteemed colleagues, are most likely what Prensky calls digital immigrants. Prensky distinguishes between digital natives and digital immigrants to differentiate between those who began their digital journey soon after birth and those who experienced a non-digital childhood. It's the difference between those who grew up with a tablet or a phone and those who remember what it was like before fast-speed internet. Another show of hands, okay, who here has immigrated or worked with immigrants or know an immigrant? So for those who have, one of the key questions immigrants face beyond survival and making ends meet is a question of belonging and identity. I'm also an immigrant. I've immigrated to the UK from Sunday Mediterranean town in my late 20s. As a young boy, between the town I lived and the sea, there was an endless stretch of beautiful golden sand dunes. I remember playing there. I remember rolling down and up, getting sand grains in every space in my body, and then running to the sea to wash it off. I did that from the moment I could move, before I could even talk or swim, to the despair of my poor parents. It's not a surprise that nowadays when I arrive to the beach, without a thought, the first thing that I do is I take my shoes off. I spread my toes in the sand, and I let the grains' texture and warmth soothe and calm my breathing, as well as all of my being exhales in a big ah, which leads me to affordance. Affordance is what the environment offers or provides us for good or ill. Fast forward a couple of decades, and I'm a father, I'm a computer scientist, I'm training to be a psychotherapist. The sand dunes do not exist anymore, and they have been replaced by modern glass buildings that house high-tech companies developing cutting-edge technology. The internet is fast, Google is a verb, and smartphones and smart devices are as plenty as humans. My children grew into this reality, and to them, interacting through screens is as natural as me rolling down the sand dunes. They are digital natives. I recall another story. I was people watching in a cafe when I spotted across the road a mother with a buggy standing near a fruit shake stand, sipping on her drink, whilst holding the phone in front of her baby's face. The baby was calm, contained, regulated. Here's a quick thought experiment. How many of you have been at home looking at your devices in the presence of other members of your household? How many of you did the same thing in a restaurant or a meeting? What do you imagine would happen if you touched or looked at the person next to you the same amount of times you touched or looked at your devices? Our language of attachment is sensory-based. Through eye contact, touch, voice, we form relationship with our caretakers. We co-regulate. And through that, we learn to determine what is safe and how to self-regulate. And that shapes our bias towards others and the world. In transactional analysis, we call that script, an unconscious relational pattern. When the process of co-regulation with our caretakers is limited or is disrupted, our sense of safety and capacity to regulate is impacted, and we become or can become avoidant, fearful, or inconsistent, which I'm sure you recognize these terms. What I'm proposing is that the sensory-based devices hack, if you like, into our protocols of attachment. And therefore, we form some sort of relationship towards them and towards interacting through them. We have a bias or an attachment style in professional lingo. And that bias shapes our sense of safety and capacity to regulate and co-regulate. It shapes how we form relationship, a key task for the therapist. In other words, when relating through screens, your bias towards sensory-based interactions impacts your capacity to set and hold the therapeutic frame. This hypothesis is gaining evidence in growing amount of research, and you can find some key references in my article that point to that. In his book, Life in the Age of Bewilderment, Christopher Bolas wrote, "In our era, the disparity between degrees of access to new forms of technology creates a widening gap between those who are employing these prosthetic extensions of the self and those who are not, and are thus potentially disabled. In my work as a supervisor and trainer, I have seen a disparity in the way that practitioners and leaders in the field adapted to the situation faced by the pandemic and its subsequent impact on the way that we work. Some easily incorporated online work into their practice. Some ferociously rejected the value of working online, and some simply stopped offering it because there is no need anymore. I believe that the rise of digital technology and its omnipresence in our day-to-day existence is the biggest shift in human history since the printing press and industrial revolution. Klaus Schwab calls this combination of hardware, software, and biology the fourth industrial revolution in his book titled by the same name. As someone who is deeply invested in the survival of the profession, I want us to develop a better relationship, understanding, and theory that supports us practitioners in this age of bewilderment. It seems to me, based on recent experience in my circles, that there is still a lot of debate about the efficacy of working therapeutically online. Questions around how safe or effective it is it good, is it bad, is it better or worse than face-to-face? I find these polarizing questions unhelpful and wanted to encourage practitioners, many who are increasingly working with digital natives, to move to a more curious and reflective frame. What my paper offers is an invitation to account for your own bias and how it might affect how you relate online. In other words, what might be at your psychological level that affects how you relate online? It also invites you to consider what could be afforded by working therapeutically online, by accounting for the quality of the contact, by paying attention and experimenting with the nature of co-creative space. My space as a practitioner meets your space as a client, supervisee, whatever. We can increase our sense of connectedness. By way of affordance, working online has also transformed what the environment affords our clients, supervisees, and trainees. The most obvious, seemingly unaccounted shift is in accessibility. The limitations of distance and physical obstacles are now only bounded by the bandwidth of our internet connection. The increase in accessibility certainly provides more equality in offerings, given that clients and supervisees can now reach almost any practitioner anywhere. This is incredibly important for clients and practitioners who are living in areas of conflict, like the Ukraine, or that have experienced natural disasters like the recent earthquake in Turkey or floods in Libya, and is something which I am particularly proud of and want to encourage and celebrate. The ability for practitioners to offer emergency mental health aid or support other practitioners dealing with the immense human suffering has far-reaching healing value and is a transformative aspect of building resilience as we tap into the collective resource of community. The removal of geographical limitations is also an important shift for people living in remote communities or in countries where the psychotherapy community is nascent, small, or where there are specialist or niche aspects of practice that are required or sought. In a similar token, being available for people who, for political reasons, are marginalized, silenced, or persecuted can be at times a lifeline. The experience of finding your tribe, a place you can belong to and be accepted for who you are without fear, is a deep psychological need and a mental health issue at times of experiencing oppression, exclusion, and alienation. But this is not without its shadow. This new borderless reality introduces a complexity that our training, ethical, and legal frameworks have not yet fully caught up with. For example, around insurance or legal jurisdiction. Having a seamless, borderless provision of service also opens up our profession to a process akin to globalization, which can put local trade in vulnerable and precarious position. Another phenomenon associated with globalization is standardization and creation of monopoly and supply chains. We are heading towards an era where countries will begin to seek, are we heading towards an era where countries will begin to seek alignment in terms of standards of provision of psychotherapy? We've talked about regulation. And if so, would that exclude the breadth and nuance of local trade? Will we end up having a centralized equivalent Google or Amazon of therapy? Would we end up needing to have functions that define, monitor, and regulate what good, healthy, and progress are? And if so, who would hold the power to do so? And what might be the risk in this situation and the potential for abuse of this power? When considering the future of psychotherapy, we need to pay attention to dynamics of power and how it manifests in inclusion and exclusions that may be at play in order to attend to our ethical duty of care. I would like to conclude this short intro with what I see as a key political questions that my article is looking to bring to the forefront. On what basis or evidence is in-person practice, supervision, or training privileged over online? In whose interest is it to privilege face-to-face work? In a world that is literally on fire, how does this support a common goal of many professional organizations to fight climate change? How does this promote access to mental health professionals and services at a time where awareness of the impact and significance of mental health is at its peak? And most importantly, how does privileging face-to-face alienate the already marginalized? I would argue that offering an exclusive form of therapy, be it online or corporeal only, is an excluding act, and would invite you, practitioners, to reflect on how that might fit with your ethical frame. Thank you.
Julia, your mic's not on.
Although it's 12 o'clock, I think we could have just a couple of minutes of questions.
Yes, sure, no problem.
Yeah. So, any questions, thoughts?
Ronen, hi, it's Arvinder. Just a quick point on your removal of geographical limitations. Does that not introduce a whole lot of cultural bias if your psychotherapist or your supervisor are in different continents and with different experiences?
Absolutely, but it also works the other way around. So in my article, for example, I talk about, actually it's my aunt, because she gave me permission. My aunt is a Argentinian Jew who immigrated to Israel, working with a psychoanalyst in Buenos Aires. So actually, for her, that worked pretty well to find someone who was more aligned with her cultural frame than what the environment afforded her. It's not black and white. This, and I think this is the thing that I'm trying kind of a move away from. It's not good or bad. It's a lot more complex. And the complexity, we work in the realm of human complexities. So why are we reducing this conversation to a polarized black and white? That baffles me.
Ronen, can I ask you a question about virtual reality, please? I'm really interested in the potential for virtual reality for therapists and clients to co-create whole worlds, and so that you can communicate experience in a completely different way. And I wondered if you had any thoughts on that.
In my article, I give an example of a movie that was directed by Steven Spielberg called Ready Player One. In Ready Player One, the protagonist wears a suit where they can feel physically the presence of other avatars in the virtual realm. We are, technology is developing. What we consider now as online therapy in 5 years is going to be completely different, and in 10 years it's going to be completely different. I think for me it's more about understanding this phenomena and phenomenological encounter, therapeutic encounter in that space that will be much more beneficial for us as practitioners.
I completely agree with you. And I was talking to my 9-year-old son is autistic. And I was talking to him in the break, and I was saying, imagine if you could create a virtual reality that I could walk around with you to understand your differing experience of the world. And I just love that idea. I think as an aid to communication, it could be incredible and really transformative, moving beyond language. But yeah, thank you.
This thing already exists, they are already in existence. There are practitioners who are already practicing.
Yeah.
It sounds maybe like science fiction, but it's a lot more present than we realize.
Well, Adele, there's an element of that already exists now. I mean, what you said then just reminded me of a few months ago, I found a diary that I'd written when I was about 5. I took it into my therapy with my therapist, who I've been seeing for 7 years. And it was a little bit like walking her through sort of a virtual realm, and myself.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to think that in some sense that's what you're talking about is already possible in a way, but just different, I think, is what you're saying, Ronen. I get it's not thinking about good or bad or better or worse. It's just more complexity, isn't it, really?
Yeah, the papyrus was invented by the Egyptians 5,500 years ago, and then that created a revolution because we started writing and making books, and the printing press created, you know, a propaganda that led to the 100 Years' War. These things happen. It's just for me, this is another development in technology. Of course, it's big and frightening, and there are a lot of things that we need to consider. And it is another technological advancement.
Can I ask?
Thank you.
Oh, too late.
I think you are now. Yes, save it for later, kind of thing. Thank you very much for our post-coffee speakers. And now I think we are going to go into groups, aren't we, Dan?
Yes, thank you, Julia, and thank everyone. You know, what an amazing array of research and views this morning.